A dull throb resounds inside my skull. The world outside my car window has vanished, replaced with an impenetrable field of white. I didn't remember how tired I was. My eyes want to shut, but I don't want them to. My hand ignores my racing heart and lies limp on the steering wheel. I don't want to die. These are some of the first words spoken in flesh, blood and concrete, and they get to the heart of the game's conflict, that of a person trying desperately to cling on to life despite everything that's haunting her. The game centers around a depressed architect named Lara, and her travels around a skeletal set of flats, as well as her struggle to find something that will make her want to live again. The whole game only lasts a bit over an hour and a half, but in that time, it manages to create a story and a message that I think is both haunting and beautiful. Through its setting, its characters, and its music, the game has become something really special to me, but it's also remained completely obscure and largely unknown, so I wanted to talk about it, and what the game means to me. The game begins with Lara, having driven apparently hundreds of kilometers from her home into the frozen wastelands of Siberia for an unknown purpose. However, in the cold and the darkness, she runs out of petrol and crashes into one of the snowbanks, and with not many options available to her, she goes over to a block of nearby flats in order to see if there's any petrol to fill up her car. Just outside the flats, she meets an excitable young girl named Nika, who agrees to help her on her way. So we have a simple mission ahead of us. We just need to get the petrol supplies and be off on our way. But then again, as we explore the apartments, there are some things that seem just a little bit out of place. I mean, the school uniform that Nika wears is decades out of date, and the flats are obviously abandoned too, so why is there still electricity and running water? In fact, why is Nika here in the first place? And also, as a minor concern, the flats appear to contain some unique interior decorating. It quickly becomes apparent that there's something supernatural going on here. At first it's mostly body horror, but as Lara continues deeper into the building, these rooms seem to shift and take on the form of many locations that Lara lived in as a child, just this time spliced with grisly images of flesh and corpses. All the while, Nika makes increasingly unsettling references to her family that lives all throughout the house, and it comes out that Nika may not be exactly human. As we find out, she is part of the apartments, and the family that she refers to are the masses of meat that we keep on encountering throughout the flats. This family has access to Lara's memories and crafts this complex in order to expose her to her past. And slowly, we begin to unravel Lara's life up to this point. As an architect, she once aspired to create great buildings that would break down convention and allow her to express herself. But now, she has grown disillusioned with her life. She feels trapped and alone, with the cold reality of adult life crashing down on her like 1,000 kilograms of concrete. A flashback tells us that she was bullied as a child, and from what we can see, she feels as disconnected from others now as she did back then. At the same time, it appears that she was either stuck in an unfulfilling job, or unable to find work at all. Whichever way it was, it combined with her loneliness to leave her feeling like her life was completely pointless, and that she had no power to do anything meaningful. And this makes her feel miserable and lost because she had so many hopes for the future, so many ideas of what she could be, but now there's just nothing left. The game makes prominent use of symbolism, and there is a lot in the game to symbolize Lara's struggles, but I think the most prominent is the atmosphere and setting. And to explain what I mean by this, I'll have to go on a bit of a tangent. Late into the game, Lara finds an old drawing she made of a building called Tatlin's Tower. This was planned to be a 400-meter tall Goliath of a building, framed by a facade of steel which spiraled upwards into the sky, while the main building was meant to consist of a series of rotating geometric shapes. Whatever you can say about it, it was immensely creative in its design, even if it was a bit bizarre. It was never actually built, because building it would have been impractical and stupid, but you can see how the sheer uniqueness and the optimism of this piece would inspire awe, and how even decades later, this fantasy building would impress its dream upon someone like Lara. She herself comments on how Tatlin was lucky to be able to dream. I mean, can you imagine it? 400 meters of steel and glass towering over Petersburg, and beaming messages into the clouds. And yet, in 1920 it seemed reasonable. I thought I could be like him, dreaming up utopian megastructures for a new era. Lara had hopes to change the world through her creations, to make something greater, something beautiful, and leave a mark on humanity. But well, Tatlin's Tower was never feasible, and what was actually created were the very buildings that Lara explores throughout the game. These seem to express what it feels like her life has become. These endless, monotonous chains of flats stretch on far past the horizon, like great corpses lying out in the snow, cold, lifeless, and ultimately abandoned. I think it reflects Lara's feelings that she's stagnated in life. It seems like she feels trapped in a great impersonal structure of society, and so in the game, she is quite literally trapped inside a great impersonal structure, while only being able to churn out more massive, soulless buildings like these, just rotting away in her work like mildewed carpets while isolated and lost. The very environment that we're in ties together with Lara's role as an architect, and I think it helps us to understand her feelings and build up her character, in a way that I don't think I've seen done to this extent before. I realize it might seem like I'm looking too deeply into this, but I feel it is intentional, and is a really cool and creative way to represent the struggles of the character. At the same time as we're seeing Lara's pessimism, it is contrasted by the other main character, Nika, who is always full of excitement and hope for the future. Despite being part of whatever organism is inhabiting these apartments, she's not malicious. In fact, she genuinely tries to help and comfort Lara along her journey. We find out that she has wild dreams of going to the moon and befriending everyone who ever looked at the night sky. But she's also trapped in these flats. As part of the organism, she is prevented from leaving and going anywhere else. She has to remain in this town with nobody for decades. She, quite literally, has no future. This is all that she's ever going to be. In other words, she's like a mirror of Lara. As a child, Lara had hope for what the future could bring, for what she could do to change the world, only to be beaten down by her inability to do anything meaningful or connect with others. Nika feels like a reflection of Lara's childhood attitudes to an extent. We can see in a flashback that Lara did not have a happy childhood. However, despite that, the childhood optimism for the future still appears to have burned in Lara, just as it now does in Nika. The interactions between the two characters are genuinely quite sweet, Nika being very bubbly and kind towards Lara, while also being very unsettling, though in an innocent sort of way. Meanwhile, Lara tries her best to reciprocate this niceness, while also being understandably freaked out by the whole situation, though it is clear that Lara sees some of herself in Nika. And I think these conversations serve to add a lot of levity to the game, while not undermining the unnerving atmosphere. At the same time as this, the two characters contrast each other in another way. Nika wants everything in the world to be connected. The individual parts of the apartment complex appear to think as a hive mind, in complete harmony and acceptance with every other part of it. Nika views this as beautiful, because everything in the flats is connected to and embraced by all the other parts. There's no loneliness or sadness, but there's also no capacity for independent thought. All that exists in this place is mindless bliss. Lara, by comparison, is completely isolated and cannot understand Nika at all, but she also deeply values her own independent thought, and is very much her own person. The difference between the two is indirectly explained in a really interesting way. Nika tells Lara about how, when she looks up at the stars in the night sky, it reminds her of how everyone in the world is connected in different ways through the stars. We all live under the same sky, so we're all connected through that. But Lara immediately refutes this by saying that the light pollution in the capital suffocates the stars, and so all she can see is smog. It's as though, in their different experiences, they're from two different worlds, but their situations still mirror each other. I do feel that the story falls just a little short in making us really care about Lara as a character. Not to say that she isn't a compelling protagonist, but I do think that she's missing something to truly elevate her from a good protagonist into a really memorable one that grips the player on a deep emotional level. Her dialogue sometimes comes off as a bit dry and leaves more personality to be desired, as well as that she can feel inconsistent. In one scene she comes off as defeated and apathetic, while in the next she's panicking about her situation, and then back again, without there being really enough that's happened between those scenes to justify her rapid shifts in character. I think something that could help is adding on to her personality by giving her more interactions with Nika that shows them getting along really well. She does have some really nice scenes with Nika, but I think it could be expanded upon. I also think that giving her more of a dry wit could have made her funnier and spiced up the descriptions, both making the game more fun to play through and getting us to like her more, while also keeping the somber tone intact. It would have also been really nice to see Lara reminisce more about her life, like really dig into her past, both the good and the bad, to expand upon who she really is and what brought her there. We get enough to understand her, but not quite enough to really connect as much as we otherwise could, at least in my opinion. She's still a good character, don't get me wrong, but in a game where the effect that it has on you is tied so much to your attachment to Lara, she doesn't stick out as much as I think she could, and it does somewhat hamper the impact that the game will have on you. Getting back to the story, after a long search, Lara finally finds the petrol, makes her way out of the building and says her goodbyes to Nika, before walking over to refill the car and return to the city. But of course, it's not that simple, because the car that Lara finds is ancient and broken down, and she suddenly realizes that this isn't a place she can escape from. When Lara drove all the way out here, she did it in order to commit suicide. She couldn't take it anymore, so she drove and drove and drove with the intention of just quietly dying out here in all the endless white nothingness, as though she had never existed at all. She regretted it as soon as she crashed and reality set in, but by that point, there was nothing that could be done. All of this game is going on while Lara is slowly dying in the snow, and everything here is most likely just a series of hallucinations that Lara's mind is conjuring up in a last desperate attempt to comfort her and distract her before she dies. Though it is definitely possible that what is happening is due to supernatural causes, I think that, metaphorically, this all stands to represent Lara's blurred thoughts in her final moments of life, as she struggles with the inevitability of her death. Nika takes Lara deeper into the building, past visions of her childhood, past the Tatlin drawing, deeper and deeper until they reach a room containing a piano with a mass of flesh protruding out of it. It's disgusting, the kind of thing that would have made Lara wretched at the start of the game, but Nika begins to play on the piano, and by playing in harmony with the apartment organism, she's able to create this entrancing yet deeply unsettling melody. And as she listens, Lara can't help but find this music beautiful. In that moment, she starts to understand what Nika means when she talks about connection and giving up your consciousness to be part of something greater. All throughout her life, Lara strove to assert herself as an individual, and it's brought her nothing but pain and failure. So the idea of just casting her humanity away and being accepted into comfortable nothingness, it slowly becomes alluring to her. And again, all these events are orchestrated by Lara's mind in order to convince her to give up any consciousness she has remaining so that she can die without understanding what's happening to her. And after a life of struggle, giving in just seems so nice. Nika leads Lara further in until you reach a grotesque organism at the heart of the building, twisted around an endless black pit. Nika tells Lara that all she has to do to disappear is go down the pit, and then she can forget all of this forever. If you choose to go down to the pit, you are met with a vision of Lara as a child, meeting her mum for dinner, and being just completely happy and at peace with everything. It's a false memory, one that Lara's mind made up for her in order to distract her, but putting yourself in Lara's shoes, you can't blame her for giving in and letting unconsciousness take her away, so that all the pain will just disappear. However, Lara can refuse to simply give in. She can insist that there must be something she can do. She needs to fight this. All the memories she's seen of happier times, far from making her forget who she is, convinced her that she wants to escape from this place and create new memories. That even simple things like seeing her cat again or playing in the snow, those have value, and she wants to experience them. Maybe she doesn't have a plan to make all the things she's struggling with go away, but she'll try her damnedest to overcome them. No matter how much Nika protests or gets upset, Lara will not back down, until eventually, Nika goes against her family's wishes and tears off a section of flesh for Lara to escape. This is normally where you get the happy ending, with Lara rediscovering meaning in her life and returning home with renewed vigor. But remember, Lara is already as good as dead by the time we begin. No matter what she does from this point on, she's never going to escape. The tragedy of this game comes from the fact that you revitalize Lara's passion for life, but you do it too late, and by now there is no possible way that she can escape from death. Nika tells us as much, but she also acknowledges that even if it's ultimately pointless, Lara should fight for hope in her last moments, that after a life of struggling to be someone, she shouldn't just give up now. And I don't know if this will seem silly, but I find that will to just continue against unconquerable odds to be really powerful. If I could get a bit personal for a minute, I've been in the same situation as Lara. Just a spiral where everything seemed to get worse and you stop seeing a future for yourself. The idea of just dying becomes like a sick comfort and then evolves into a real consideration. Then things start to pile onto you, even small ones, one at a time, before eventually one event happens that jolts you into going through with it. In my experience, I wasn't really thinking straight, but I ended up getting consumed by this single-minded desire to just end things. But once the reality of what I'd done set in, I just wanted to do anything to go back. After my own attempt, it felt kind of like I'd been sinking deeper into a pool of water, until my vision of the world grew distorted and slowly gotten darker and darker as the numbness set in. But after, I felt like I had risen to the surface and I could see everything as it really was. I think that at the end of the game, Lara has the same feeling. For me personally, that makes the whole thing much sadder, since I can relate somewhat to Lara's feelings, and I think this could really have been a turning point in her life. There's no way to look at this ending as an optimistic one. It's a person dying out in the cold among her shattered dreams and her hallucinations, but the fact this is upsetting, and the fact that it's tragic, also expresses the message of suicide not being the answer in a really poignant way. The message is obviously an important one, but for someone who's in the grips of suicidal thoughts, it can often ring hollow. Just from my own experience, I knew rationally that how I was feeling wouldn't last forever, but in that moment, it didn't matter. It still felt like the only thing I wanted to do was end things. Often people know that suicide isn't the right decision, but that doesn't always override the emotions leading us to suicide. But more than just being told that it's wrong, Flesh, blood, and concrete make us feel how wrong it is. We spend the whole game watching Lara as she finds reasons to keep going. We root for her to succeed, only to be deeply saddened by the fact that she cannot. And in the sheer repulsiveness of all the flesh monsters that try to convince Lara to stay, we can see how viscerally awful it is to give in and embrace death, how doing that robs you of your most fundamental attributes as a human being. The fact that this game is a tragedy, and the fact that it hurts to see Lara being unable to make it out, delivers what I think is a really powerful anti-suicide message. The ending feels like a reminder that maybe it is too late for Lara, but it isn't too late full stop. We can take how we wanted Lara to fight on and find a second chance at life, and apply it to our own lives so as to remind us that it's always worthwhile to struggle onwards, no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem. I can speak from experience when I say that giving in is never the solution, but this game, more than just telling you this, forces you to feel it. I don't know. I think there is hope in that message, and being delivered through such horrific events makes it even stronger. I can't say for certain this game will resonate with you in the same way that it has for me. It's not a masterpiece. There are flaws, and I don't feel like the characters were as emotionally powerful as they could have been, but underneath those flaws, there's a really special story here, and I think that it's a game that is really worth experiencing.